scholarly identity have come to overlap and inform each other in ways, to inform the ways that I understand and do ethnomusicology. Today, I'd like to present two case studies that show how filmmaking can be used to enrich ethnomusicological research methods and translate ethnomusicological ideas beyond the walls of the Academy. One project involves making short films in underground tango music scenes in Buenos Aires. The other, filming music-making activities with people with dementia in the United States. Very different studies. The first will illustrate the kinds of films that emerge when audiovisual modes of knowledge production are integrated as a theoretical and methodological core of our research frameworks. The second will address and emphasize a leading global health problem and show how films informed by ethnomusicological ways of thinking can contribute to public conversations about positive social change. Instead of advocating that we all stop writing to make movies, I propose a model that integrates filmmaking into what we could think of as the applied intercultural arts research toolkit. Ethnographic monographs and peer-reviewed written journal articles have long been the primary mode through which ethnomusicologists share their research findings. The term ethnography means to write about culture, but in the process of doing fieldwork, ethnomusicologists often record sound and video, take pictures, perform music, engage with communities, and immerse themselves in all kinds of other types of embodied experiences that inform our research. Nonetheless, more times than not, our written texts become the primary focus of our research outputs. And all those other things that we do largely become illustrative side texts and supplementary digital materials accompanying the main arguments. In figure 1, we see X. In example 2, we hear Y, etc. When ethnomusicologists do and have made films, they historically have lived on the archival sidelines of our discipline, as if we haven't quite figured out what to do with them, where they belong, or how to intellectually engage with them. One of the reasons for ethnomusicology being a discipline of words is, of course, that for many years, it was very complicated and expensive to find ways to share quality photographs and video and audio recordings outside of our written work, or alongside our written work. In 2018 and deep into 2019, deep into the digital age and YouTube and social media and everything else, we're at this moment, I think is an exciting moment, where we can shift and we have all these tools that we can use to reimagine and reshape both the types of research that we produce and how we share that research with others. In their 2017 book, A Different Kind of Ethnography, anthropologists Danielle Elliott and Derek Culhane redefine ethnography as, quote, a methodology of inquiry into collaborative or co-creative knowledge-making informed by certain ethical, creative, and intellectual orientations, end quote. One of the benefits of this definition is that it allows us to open creative spaces for this process of reimagining how we gather and share ethnomusicological knowledge. Rethinking ethnography beyond the written monograph is not only an invitation for creativity in our intellectual practice, but also for the empowerment of marginalized voices. As Culhane states, quote, researching how we come to know what we know clears paths for ethnographers and collaborators to take often marginalized forms of embodied, affective, imaginative, and creative knowledge seriously, and in this way to challenge and transform social theory from the bottom up by intervening at the site of its production, end quote. In an intellectual moment when we're working to decolonize the field of ethnomusicology, questions of how we come to know what we know and how we share what we learn with others are more important than ever. Multimodality is a term that has been gaining traction over the past few years in anthropology and in related fields. It refers to the combination of different modes of research in the production of academic texts. In 2017, the Journal of American Anthropological Society American Anthropologists opened a new section called Multimodal Anthropologies to accommodate this new trend. As semiotician Gunther Kress explains, quote, modes are resources whereby we make meaning material, end quote. Multimodality, understood this way, acts as an invitation to think critically and carefully about the modes we use to communicate ethnomusicological knowledge. In this way, we can begin to move from using written language as the primary and sole mode of communicating meaning, opening creative spaces for the multi-layered production of ideas. While my own multimodal practices draw together written and spoken words, photographs, and short films, multimodal ethnographies could take any number of forms. The key is a renewed effort in positioning other ways of knowing alongside, not beneath, text, thereby destabilizing long-standing hierarchies of how we have for so long talked to each other in academia. As a musician, scholar, or musician academic, as many of us are, accustomed to moving between what often feels like a big gap between artistic and scholarly languages of communication, multimodal research models offer exciting possibilities for bringing some of the multisensory nature of these expressive practices we study back into our research outputs. My own approach to multimodality involves filming and editing short, publicly shareable digital films, and then positioning these films online as carefully theorized elements within my written work. Sorry, I'm a wanderer when I speak.
Oh.
I'm going to make your camera go.
It's okay.
My process of developing this model was and continues to be informed by some large questions. I ask, how do we think differently about our research when we filter them, our research questions when we filter them through the lens of a camera or sequences on an editing timeline versus notes in a journal and text words on a page? How are film and digital video uniquely valuable to ethnomusicology and applied intercultural arts research in their capacity to evoke and share experiential forms of knowledge? Beyond producing multimodal ethnographies, how can scholars learn to converse multimodally, to engage with audiovisual knowledge with the same critical eye used in the way that we engage with written texts? With these questions in mind, let's talk about Tango. My interest in using film in research emerges from an issue that ethnomusicologists have been thinking about for quite some time. This is the issue of exoticization of popular music genres as they enter into global markets of circulation. More specifically, the way world music, global pop, and tourist industries often reduce musical cultures into exotic and othering caricatures or cliches, into images that tell one piece of a genre's complex story. Tango is a classic example of a popular music genre that has been repurposed in exaggerated form for global consumption. The music and dance style developed in the ports of Buenos Aires, Argentina, and Montevideo, Uruguay, in the early 20th century. Parallel to becoming a symbol of national identity as a music and dance culture in both Argentina and Uruguay, it became one of the first mass-mediated world music genres and industries, gaining popularity first across the Americas and Western Europe, and then on to places like Finland, Japan, and Vietnam. Over time, global representations of tango in mass media became focused around the genre as a corporeal expression of passion, steeped in stereotypes of exoticized Latinness. From the 60s to the 90s, a period characterized by violent dictatorships, social repression, and the rise of politicized folk and international rock music, tango fell out of mass popularity in Argentina. During this period, tango musicians and dancers turned their attention to marketing their culture to the world as a genre for export. For export, it's actually the term that they use to sell things. As touring theaters and cabarets from Paris to New York and Helsinki welcomed these staged representations of Latin passion, the divide grew between remaining living tango music and dance practices within Argentina and Uruguay, and tango as the genre for export. By the 1980s, tango in Argentina was seen mostly as a music for export, or for old people, sort of the grandparents' music, and was really the last thing most hip, urban Argentine youth were interested in to have anything to do with. All this began to change in the years leading up to and following 2001. After undergoing one of the largest financial crashes in modern economic history, Argentina underwent drastic cultural, political, and economic transformations. The devaluation of the peso brought tourists from around the world flooding to the country in search of inexpensive Malbec, steak, gauchos, and of course tango. The devaluation of the peso also destroyed the middle class in Argentina, igniting waves of social protest, horizontal models of grassroots organizing, and political movements seeking alternatives to the neoliberal and North American economic models that many blamed for the crash. Along with anti-imperialist movements came efforts to revalorize cultural practices that were considered uniquely Argentine. Among these, among this interest in sort of seeking out non-imperialist cultural forms, because in the 90s, people told me that they would have American flags on the walls in Buenos Aires, and it was a very sort of pro-North America thing. You listened to rock music, and it was very much sort of following the trends. And after the crash, there was this big shift where people were so angry that they wanted to look elsewhere for cultural practices. So among a renewed interest in national and non-imperialist cultural forms, many young people started taking a renewed interest in tango music and dance. The fact that there was money to be made in tourist industries and the emergence of public popular music conservatories where musicians could study jazz, tango, and folklore styles also drew young people to the genre. Since 2001, tango has experienced then a revival in two overlapping, entangled, and contrasting arenas. First, as a music and dance product for tourist consumption, heavily supported by the city government's attempt to brand Buenos Aires as the tango city, which is something they were doing very intentionally. And this is what Argentine artists call sort of for export tango, sort of tourist tango. And as a revitalized local genre of urban popular music infused with the politics of contemporary grassroots youth movements and a lot of the ideologies of the new Latin American left. This other type of tango I've come to call tango not for export. It's very literal. I use the terms tango for export and not for export because they allow us to move away from problematic conversations about authenticity and to focus instead on the intended audiences of cultural practices. Just to clarify, most musicians that I know who perform not for export tango are far from against the idea of tourists and foreigners supporting their musical endeavors. But unlike for export shows, these artistic projects are not designed exclusively to be marketed to and consumed by non-locals. So not for export tango artists are delighted to perform on international stages. It's just that when they write the music or choreograph the dances, they're intended for a local audience. Both the globalization and exoticization of tango and the revitalization of the genre in post-crisis Argentina have received scholarly attention by ethnomusicologists and dance scholars. Marta Savillano studied the colonizing gaze behind the global consumption of tango dance in a famous book that she wrote in the 90s. Melissa Fitch, who's actually here at the University of Arizona, explored global tango subcultures that have brought new meaning to the genre in different parts of the world, sort of the tango for export, not for export, but outside of Argentina. Mercedes Lisca has looked at the sexual politics of growing queer tango movements. And Morgan Luker writes about tango as an economic resource in the context of government, nonprofit, and grassroots cultural industries. These, and all other studies of the genre that I've found, use text as their primary mode of inquiry and analysis. My own tango research for the past decade has focused on the relocalization of globalized popular music genres. What happens when globalized genres return home, and what are the processes through which artists breathe new localized meanings into practices previously dominated by globalized imaginaries? Instead of focusing on stage shows and dance halls that market this for export version of tango, I conducted my fieldwork in local bars and neighborhood spaces where tango is shared as a participatory music form and not danced. So there's plenty of places where tango is informally and sort of tango not for export as a dance phenomenon. I have always studied tango more as a music phenomenon. So. These neighborhood music scenes are significant because they played a central role in providing urban spaces of belonging where new and old understandings of the genre could be collaboratively constructed through local and informal live music practices. To study how neighborhood tango music bars and scenes acted as a counterculture and counter-imaginary to for-export industries, I immersed myself as a violinist, a photographer, filmmaker, ethnographer, and community organizer in the neighborhood tango underground. While occupying these different roles, anything from playing in tango string orchestras to helping organize festivals to sitting in bars, I worked to construct understandings of the genre from this street or bar level perspective. Since many artists work in tango for export stage shows to make a living, neighborhood tango bars acted as places that they would come after work to unwind, reconnect with, and collectively reinvent localized aesthetics for their creative practice. There's sort of a backstage, front stage version of a lot of these artists. Starting in 2005, I began my fieldwork in the Almagro neighborhood, a residential middle-class neighborhood known for its late-night circuit of non-for-export tango music venues. filled with amateurs and professional tango musicians and aficionados from all ages and all walks of life, and mostly middle class, but definitely, I would say, all classes were represented. In these scenes, I quickly realized that I needed an audiovisual mode through which to address the disconnect between the experiences I was having in these bars and the ideas people outside Argentina had about what I meant when I said I was studying tango, tango culture. Because dominant stereotypes of tango continue to be disseminated through powerful audiovisual modes of representation, I turn towards what I call sensory filmmaking. Welcome. As an experiential mode of knowledge production to empower not-for-export tango narratives. Film not only allowed me to use an audiovisual mode to contest and diversify representations of tango in mediated spheres, but also allowed me to create and publicly share ethnographic representations of tango where local artists could feel themselves and see themselves represented. The audiovisual vocabularies I used to frame my filmmaking practices were inspired by theories from visual and sensory ethnography. Instead of entering the field with a storyboard and filming